The Final Chapter on JFK. Chapter 2, Segment 2, Military.
Thanks for tuning in to this section on possible suspects. This time we're going to be talking about the military-industrial complex. And when I use that term, it sounds pretty complicated, but the truth of the matter is President Eisenhower was the one that maybe wasn't the first person to coin it, but was the most famous person to use that term. And he used that when he was leaving office as president and Kennedy was replacing him. And what he basically talked about was that America should be very watchful of the expansion of our U.S. military and our U.S. military manufacturers. And maybe they're getting too cozy together and perhaps maybe too big together. So that was the start of the term military-industrial complex. As it relates to the Kennedy assassination, the theory used by the people who advanced the military-industrial complex theory in killing Kennedy is that this group killed Kennedy because he wanted to withdraw U.S. troops out of South Vietnam and end the Vietnam War. To discuss this rationally, what I want to do is I want to divide the military-industrial complex into two parts. We're going to discuss military first, and then in the next segment, we're going to discuss the industrial complex. When we talk about the United States military being involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the first thing that comes to mind is what branch? Air Force, Coast Guard, Navy, Army, Marines, or was it all or some of those branches? It really doesn't make too much sense for someone to make a claim that the military-industrial complex killed Kennedy and they can't even define which group in the military killed him. Beyond the issue of which branch or branches were involved in killing Kennedy, the next question comes down to which leaders of which branches were involved in killing Kennedy. Was it a general, an admiral? Who? No one knows and no one ever says. So when you look at political assassinations and you look at whether the military's involvement in Kennedy's death related to a revolution, well, nothing happened after Kennedy died, and it wasn't a revolution from within or without. Was it some type of cause? Well, they didn't make any announcement. The military didn't say anything. Or was it a coup? If it was a coup, no one in the military, no one in any of the branches took over any other position they had in the government. So it's a little strange to say that the U.S. military, whether one branch or all the branches, whether it was one general or all the generals, conspired together when neither the branches nor any of these leaders of the branches benefited. And if you go further, the real theory is that Kennedy was killed because in October of 1963, he signed a NASM, or National Security Action Memoranda, NASM 263, on South Vietnam, basically saying that the U.S. was going to withdraw all of our troops by 1965, and that we were going to withdraw 1,000 troops from Vietnam by December 31st, 1963. And people have used Kennedy's signing of that memoranda as the basis for the military-industrial complex killing Kennedy, because he was withdrawing troops from Vietnam. Now, with that said, people forget that on December 26, 1963, just several days after Kennedy's assassination, Johnson, as the new president, signed National Security Action Memorandum 273, basically following the same format that Kennedy had with the other one, with the exception that there had been a killing of the president of South Vietnam during that time, and there were concerns about that. The key point with a claim that the military killed Kennedy as a result of him signing this action memorandum on October 11th, 1963, is that not only did Kennedy sign it, but the Secretary of Defense, Robert S. McNamara, signed it, meaning he was in agreement. And are you ready for this? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Maxwell Taylor, also signed it, meaning he was the chairman of all of the military branches, and he signed it and agreed to it also. So it's a little hard to believe that either he or some subordinate departments wouldn't agree with the memorandum that he signed. Further, and which is perhaps the most embarrassing thing about this claim relating to the military, is people say, oh, Kennedy pulled the troops out of Vietnam. He did that and they killed him. In 1963, at the time that John F. Kennedy signed that memorandum, the United States had 4 million active troops. 4 million. And out of that 4 million, 1/2 of 1% is 20,000. The number of troops that were in Vietnam in 1963 were 16,380. Kennedy was going to withdraw less than 1/2 of 1% of all U.S. troops serving in our military. So at least as far as the military goes, they always have a term that there's always a war somewhere, and pulling out of Vietnam and taking less than 1/2 of 1% of all the U.S. troops and taking them out certainly wasn't doing any threatening damage to our military or to supply a basis as to kill Kennedy. Let's go to the next part of this segment, which is the industrial complex, and I'll see you soon.